Sam did it through me. He used me. He made me go out there and do it. I did it for him, for Bob.
Imagine living with your son, daughter, father, or mother for yours or their entire lives, completely normal. Then imagine your son, daughter, father, or mother having their life and legacy completely destroyed by a weaponized system that was designed to ultimately take your rights and freedoms away. And then being forced to accept some mental health narrative while knowing all the while that this all transpired within a matter of days, weeks, or a few months. That is the reality that many Americans and people in the Western nations are facing today. Entire lives and legacies are being destroyed, all to push a narrative and usher in something our children are going to have to live with. Pre-crime policing, mental health Gestapo, massive restrictions on freedom, and draconian laws. This has been at work since the late 1960s, but since 2001, there has been a massive explosion in these cases, both nationally and locally, to create the illusion that a mental health crisis is everywhere, when the fact is, it is external sources causing it. This is exactly what happened to David Berkowitz, as one of the first handful of test subjects that would become a nationwide crime story mixed with Satanism and hocus pocus. David Berkowitz told his sister that he believed his phones were being tapped and he was being followed. After he was sensitized to this and put into a hypervigilant state of mind, these seemingly supernatural events began to happen around him, which, in the heat of fear and bewilderment, can warp anyone's reality and have them believing the impossible is going on around them. It's an established fact that many people who are subjected to these voice of God weapons believe the sound is coming from the walls around them or their general vicinity. It's not in their head. Here, David Berkowitz points to the wall and says, "Hi, my name is Mr. Williams and I live in this hole." There are many areas of his apartment where he has punched holes in the walls, alluding to the voices coming from the walls. What is never pointed out is that what he writes down is generally what is being said to him. It's not what he is saying. Here it says, "I have several children I'm turning into killers." And then it says, "Wait until they grow up." That is what he is being told. And it appears to Berkowitz that it is coming from the wall. It is never pointed out that most of what Berkowitz writes is in quotes. Sam's creation, the Duke of Death, the Wicked King Wicker, the 22 Disciples of Hell, John Wheaties, rapist and suffocator of young girls. These are all things in quotes. Quotes fill every one of his letters. These are all related to what he is hearing, not what he is saying. It is also never pointed out that he has almost childish handwriting, and compared to his letters, the handwriting is almost completely different, almost like someone else wrote them. When Berkowitz says there are other sons out there, he is specifically referring to what he was being told in his apartment. Quote unquote, "I have several children I'm turning into killers, just wait until they grow up." That is what he wrote on the wall. In the letter that he wrote to Maury Terry, he wrote, "This is all a plot, there are other sons out there, God help the world." Both of these statements are referring to other people being primed and attacked with voice of God weapons, whether he realizes it or not. Berkowitz was ex-military police, ex-postal worker. All his jobs had been with the U.S. government. Countless victims of voice of God weapons have been told things like, "You're now an operator for the U.S. government," or "You're our creation." Sam Carr was just one of countless neighbors these voices mentioned to him, which is typical in these cases. The real reason why the term Son of Sam was said to Berkowitz had nothing to do with Sam Carr. It was an inside joke that was being played on Berkowitz. Son of Sam actually meant creation of Uncle Sam, a son of Sam. Maury Terry, who spent a large portion of his life investigating this case, was so close, and I have the utmost respect for him. Had Terry been dialed into these technologies, he would have had the entire case solved. What hurt Terry the most was being naive about law enforcement dealings and aligning himself with people who were going to subvert the narrative. If Terry was alive today, he would totally get this. Due to David Berkowitz having this experience in 1978, it was very hard for him to explain the voices and what he was experiencing. Because of that, the whole talking dog thing started. It made the entire case confusing when the entire time he was just hearing voices and having these artificial paranormal happenings around him. This is the same thing that the Lutz family dealt with, that the DeFeos dealt with, and John Linley Frazier and Herbert Mullen on the West Coast dealt with before it came to the East Coast. It was just a different script.
Most serial killers, many of them, there is that element. Tying the woman up and subduing her or killing her. Berkowitz, he would shoot these people and then he would run away. And, you know, again, you're left with the question of motivation. That's the part that doesn't make sense to me. Why?
It was not until the age of voice of God weapons that you had these seemingly motiveless crimes that appeared out of nowhere and continued to snowball until the explosion of present day. Back then they couldn't make sense of this. On the West Coast from the late 60s and early 70s to the East Coast in the 70s, none of it made sense. However, when looking at the goal of voice of God weapons and controlling a human being from the perspective of these operators, it made perfect sense.
The goal remained the same. As this CIA memo says, the aim is controlling an individual to the point where he will do our bidding against his will, and even against such fundamental laws of nature as self-preservation.
This is not an attack on David Berkowitz and his faith, but you have to understand how a man who has been inside prison since the 1970s would still believe this to be demons. There is concrete evidence that these weapons are in use in the 21st century.
You can put fake troop movements quarter of a mile away on a hillside. Or you can whisper in the ear of a supposed terrorist some biblical verse.
Berkowitz was part of a beta test. Sure, they could manipulate people to become assassins and look for signs of when to kill, but could they create an assassin and pick the target? Mark David Chapman killing John Lennon after being subjected to voices in the walls would answer that. Help me get in front of David Berkowitz for 15 minutes and we will prove that what Berkowitz experienced in the 1970s is exactly what countless people are experiencing in the 21st century. This is all a plot. There are more suns out there. God help the world. So now, I'd like you to think about the people you love and are closest to. Think about your relationship with them and how close you are. Now imagine the police or a shrink telling you that one of the people closest to you just snapped, went schizophrenic or psychotic and killed a bunch of people. Would you really believe it? Would you really accept it without question? The idea of this happening is so ridiculous that it's hard to believe that anyone could accept it.
Lookoutfa Charlie.